This panel session this afternoon. I hope it's going to be an interesting one. We have four very distinguished speakers and experts in biometrics and forensic science. Professor Mark Nixon, Dr. Brendan Clare, Professor Tenu Tan, and Professor Christophe Champot. Now, the topic that we'll be discussing together, it's not discussing among us, it's discussing together, is about the integration of the biometric and forensic science in these days. And that takes inspiration from a cost action, a European cost action, which is cost action ICB-2013, which is exactly with this theme, integrated biometric and forensic science for the digital age, which has the aim of bridging together these two communities that, strangely enough, historically has been very closely linked, because if you think the AFIS systems are a forensic, sort of forensic or law enforcement application of biometric technologies, you know? And that was a very successful example. There are other successful examples. We believe that can be other examples today and in the future, but in order to achieve them, we need to stimulate an innovative and timely cooperation between biometrics and forensic science communities. In order to do that, this cost action is promoting networking. And the way it's promoting networking is by different means. It's, for example, is promoting and sponsoring events like this one, where we have a joint panel discussion, we can share ideas and maybe see future directions. But also to exchange people. So, for example, one of the instruments of this cost action are short-term scientific missions, which means that we can support students to visit other people's labs across Europe or even outside Europe. And also we can fund special sessions, other events, or even training school, as we'll have next week. And these are some of the topics which are addressed by the action. Even though the action doesn't support directly research, it's not like a research project where you have a focused track, still it's stimulating discussion and work on these areas. Currently, we are about 50 institutions from 27 countries, of which for non-CONS countries, which means countries from outside Europe, we have among the members Professor Nabil Jain, Professor Arun Ross, Professor Tenu Tan, Professor Ajay Kumar, and Professor Sridharan from different countries like China, US, and Australia. And so these should, let's say, stimulate through international cooperation with a strong commitment, with wide expertise, with academic and industrial partnership, and also with some links with European Network for Forensic Science Institutes. So our dream is to build a classroom like the one that built Alphonse Bertillon in the early 20th century, where he was, teaching legal experts on how to use his new scientific methodologies to our large forensic biometric community. But now I think it's time to start with very short presentations from our expert, and then we'll follow some discussion. First presentation will be by Professor Christophe Champot, please. So I can bring up, oops. It's on the desktop somewhere. Okay, yep. It's very slow going.
Well, I had the privilege to speak all morning, so as soon as I found a button, oh, geez. Here we go.
Slow responding.
I think I'd rather to hear from you and the reverse, but I just want to stress on two key elements that make forensic science a little bit of a challenge. The first is the fact that forensic scientists are exposed to entries of a quality which may vary greatly. And most of the time, we are dealing with the right side of the house. And the known recording and the prints are of high quality. But as soon as we are talking about traces left without the cooperation of the donor or under unconstrained conditions, it's every time a challenge in a sense that you are dealing with entries or queries which are at the bottom side in terms of quality. And that leads to a certain number of difficulties. And the second thing I'd like to highlight in this little graphic is that not only the variation in terms of quality can happen on both sides of the compared elements. So you may in the sort of ideal 10 print to 10 print comparison, you are under the type of what I've called the sub-process 1. You have high quality on the query and high quality in the gallery. And generally this is not a big difficulty. And then you may have asymmetric situation where the query is of low quality compared to a high quality gallery, or vice versa, which make the task more difficult. And this is the sub-process 2. And the last one is when everything is of poor quality. If you want to compare a latent print from crime scene 1 to another latent print on crime scene 2 and try to find relationships between these two, or you have two unknown recordings of very poor quality, or two facial images from two burglaries where you're trying to find a common authorship. And this range of scenarios involving various types of quality material as an input in complete, generally unconstrained conditions for what is recovered from crime scene or scenes of interest. That's what makes the application of biometrics to forensic science a challenge, which I'm more than happy to have so many people in the room interested in. But I look forward to the discussion of the panel. Thank you.
So I'm going to talk about the same idea, which is quality, and more specifically, the need for improved quality metrics. So my context is mostly in face recognition, but perhaps this applies to other biometrics. I think fingerprint is more advanced in the ability to extract automated quality metrics. But the notion of quality, as Christoph just discussed, is essential in forensic use of biometric technology. If a biometric sample, such as a face image, is of very high quality, then there's certain expectations you should have on the ability to match that image. By contrast, if an image is of very low quality, then your expectations should be decreased, and perhaps a match score has a different interpretation. So really what constitutes quality, it's depending on your application. In this case, if we think of biometrics used in a forensic perspective, it's all with respect to the biometric matcher. So if a biometric matcher is strong at off-pose face images, then maybe the measurement of pose and incorporating that into your quality metric doesn't matter, because if your matcher is robust to pose, then off-pose is not a quality issue. So it's all with respect to your matcher. The quality should should somehow infer the likelihood that your image is going to generate a high match score. So if your image is low quality with respect to your matcher, that means the likelihood it's going to generate a high match score should be low, because you're not going to get the same features extracted from it. We've had a paper here, actually from Professor Tain's group, on pairwise quality. So we can think of quality with just one image, but also it's how that image and another image, their joint quality together. Sometimes two ill quality images are so similar that in their bad aspect, again, maybe you have a matcher that's not good at pose, but two off-pose face images with the same pose will somehow match well together. So the notion of joint quality is quite important as well. So research in these fields, I think, is critical, and I think it's understudied. It's one that we want to improve our face recognition algorithms, and again, I approach this from the context of face, but as our face recognition algorithms have matured, we haven't kept pace with the quality metrics. I'm going to give an example here. So this is from empirical data. So with a particular quality metric here, we can look at non-match likelihoods. And so the poor quality images, and so on the x-axis here you have match scores, and this is from a commercial face matcher, and on the y-axis you have non-match likelihood. So the higher the value, the less likely a match score is considered to be a match. So for poor quality images, a high match score has a higher interpretation. So here you can see, for example, if you follow this line down here, a match score of 0.3, if you have a good quality image in this example here, there's an 80% chance that the match score of 0.3 means they're a non-match. But if your image is of low quality, that match score of 0.3 is a lot harder to get at. So from there, you might have more faith that if you get a match score of 0.3, what to do. These are things that can be implicitly embedded into our face recognition systems, but they can also be provided to users of the biometric systems. When people are retrieving images from a gallery database, sometimes forensic cases they show the match scores, sometimes they don't. If they do show the match scores, though, context matters, and sometimes we don't know with a particular matcher what is good and what is bad. So this notion of objective quality, quality with respect to a matcher. So development of quality algorithms that can take a particular matcher and learn what it likes and what it doesn't like, and alert somebody that this image here, this is a bad image. Doesn't like this image. So if you get a low match score, that's not necessarily a bad thing, that it usually can't even get this low match score with this particular quality image. It also alerts the forensic experts. So different agencies in the United States, some of the New York Police Department, for example, does face recognition, and they have lots of sophisticated tools. If they can know ahead of time that an image is very low quality with respect to their matcher, they can start to apply the tools from Animetrics and the Photoshop and improve the quality of their face images. If they know ahead of time that something's very high quality, then they can skip those steps and go to matching and expect for a higher rank retrieval. So anyways, I just think, something for us to discuss here. I'm interested what people think in terms of, why there's not more research from our community in the actual quality estimates, and whether people think that it's not important or not. I think from people I talk to in the field, they would very much like to have improved quality metric algorithms. So it's perhaps an interesting topic for us to discuss. Thanks.
So let's Professor Mark Nixon.
Hi, I'm going to share with you some thoughts, and then I'm going to come to one main point at the end. And I do get approached, because we work on gate here and soft, I do get approached by the police, by security agencies, MI5, MI6, quite a bit about translating our biometrics to a forensic scenario. And you can normally imagine how you can translate biometrics to a forensic scenario, and I've had no problem. Even Mohammed this afternoon was telling us you can tell gender from ear. Seems very surprising, but you can translate them in some sense to a forensic scenario. So when I do that, the question then is, if you're in a judicial situation, how do you convince the judge? And so when I've worked on this, I then say, well, if because I'm a biometrics expert, I'm most likely to be called as an expert witness, and so I might as well follow the Dorbit standard. Yeah? And when I go through, I look through that, and number one says whether the technique is falsifiable and or testable, and yes, I can answer the judge on that point. Whether it has been subjected to peer review, and yes, we're academics, we can answer that point. But also I've published in forensics journals and solicitors' journals, because I think that would help to convince a judge as well. And then there's a question of the potential, known or potential error rate, and that's the one that vexes me the most. There's always a question on standards, yeah? And you might say, well, some of your biometrics are too new, there's no such thing as a standard on gate. But there, of course, I could tell the judge that there is receiver-operator characteristics, equal error rate. These are standard across the biometric community. And so that would be my answer there. And the degree to which the theory and technique is generally accepted by the relevant scientific community, well, I can point to sessions on here and gait recognition and in big international conferences. So I've got a lot of answers to those questions, except for that one in the middle, the known or potential error rate. So here's one. This is a guy, Niels Linnerup. He works in Denmark. He uses gait. And he's more a podiatrist or an anatomical podiatrist than we are. We use biometrics. And so we were approached by the police, and they said, can you match these things? Can you say that the same guy did this crime on 2 different days? So what we did was we just hand-labeled the guy, and we then matched the guy's gait in the 2 different things, and we could say that the same guy did the crime on the different dates. And of course, you could do nothing else. There's no face recognition. He's wearing a motorbike helmet. He's wearing gloves, so there's no fingerprints. He withheld his DNA as well. So there's nothing else. You can only recognize him by his gait. And so when we were doing that, then the question was, how do we do the matching? And this is the error rate question. And so what we did was we took Tianu's CASIA database, and we found a viewpoint which is the same, and we then did that automatically at that viewpoint. And we said, what is the match of that subject across that viewpoint to the rest of the database? These lines here, these up and down bits, these are, of course, actually variants across the database. And we found that the subject, the different subject, is a much poorer match than the other one. The same subject is the best match. And then we could say, beyond reasonable doubt, we're convinced that that guy is the same guy. Beyond reasonable doubt, because he's easily the best match. And we also measured confidence. We've sort of measured it the wrong way up. Good confidence is decreasing to 0. We should have had it going up. But, that's life, yeah. So we could improve that. But I think, when you challenge that view on the Dorbit standard, the one bit you can challenge yourself is this error rate. Because the question is sort of sampling theory applied to database. And we don't really have enough of this in biometrics. And so when I come down to when I look at this whole question, I come up with one question. Yeah? And it reminds me of when Lance Armstrong was interviewed on British television. Yeah, this is before he confessed. And they interviewed him on British television, yeah, and they said, welcome to Lance Armstrong on Newsnight, BBC One, yeah. Did you take drugs? And Lance Armstrong said, well, yes, perhaps, no, maybe, might do. Did you take drugs? Well, yes, blah, 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 evasion. Did you take drugs? Did you take drugs? Did you take drugs? Did you take drugs? And that's where they cut the program. Yeah? They just ask one question every time. And the one question I ask is, this question about the sampling theory. How big should our database be? If we're going to get a confident estimate of that error rate, how big should the database be? And if you answer any of these questions, it means you have the theory correct, and then you can answer that question, how big should the database be? And I don't really think we've got an answer to that. We did ourselves write a paper on this once. It was some time ago. It wasn't a particularly good paper, but we just thought we'd try and answer the question. Yeah? It's actually a very difficult question to ask. And so, you might disabuse me. It might be that I'm not sufficiently, completely aware of the literature in this subject. It's always hard to find new ideas. But I think the real question on this is, how do we check the database size? Thank you.
Professor Tan? Well, I thought we have already had too many PPTs, so I have no PPT, so just a few points to make. I think when you talk about the interplay between biometrics and forensic sciences, I think a better description is not the integration of the two, as the panel were talking about today. Rather, I think biometric for forensic sciences or biometric in the context of forensic sciences. Biometric obviously has been used in forensic sciences for many years. You probably recall the very first book by Sir Francis Galton, published some 20 years ago. So in my view, forensic sciences or forensic applications should really be a driving force for biometrics, because the situations when you talk about application in forensic sciences are usually more challenging than the cases that we address in the usual biometric research. This morning, Christopher gave a wonderful talk about some of the challenging issues in biometrics in the context of forensic sciences. In my view, I think the three most challenging issues for biometrics in the context of forensic sciences are the following. That's my personal view, and obviously this is open for discussion. The first one, I think, is the low quality of the biometric data in the context of forensic sciences. For example, on criminal science, obviously the images, fingerprint images they can collect from the scores usually are very of low quality images. And the second challenge for biometric in the context of forensic sciences, I think, is the scarcity of biometric data. You cannot expect, obviously, a lot of data from forensic science, forensic applications. The other challenging issue for biometric in the context of forensic sciences, in my view, is the possible inconsistency of multimodal biometric data. So these are the three, it's more sort of from the point of view of biometrics. These are the three most challenging issues when you talk about biometric for forensic application or in the kind of forensic applications. My group has been developing a lot of algorithms for iris recognition. Iris recognition is one of my major research topics in biometrics. So obviously I've been thinking the whole iris recognition can be used in forensic applications. So this is also an open question, because when you talk about biometric for forensic applications, you obviously we'll talk about fingerprint or palm print or gait, as Mark already mentioned. But iris recognition is viable for forensic sciences, open issue. So that's the few points I will make before the discussion. Thank you.
Good. So that's their view of the problem of integration of biometrics and forensics. So what is your view, or what are your questions about their views?
Right, okay, I'll start a bit of controversy here. Panels should disagree. I don't think quality is important at all, but it's part of the picture. I think the question is the error rate in the end. You have to convince a judge that you know that this guy, beyond reasonable doubt, is either the subject who convicted, well, whatever, did the crime, or didn't do the crime. This stuff can let people off as well as convict them. And I think quality is simply part of that argument. But the real question is, what is the error rate? And you have to know that to convince a judge. So a bit of debate.
In the interest of disagreeing, my thought though is I don't think we can ever be sure. I am very pessimistic of probability estimates that are true probability estimates. Personally, that's just my personal opinion, to stand in front of a judge and to convict someone based on noises that could be occurring in these forensic cases that we cannot model. We don't have data to model this in real life, that there's variants that are out of our control. So I just always think of biometrics as the finger pointing at somebody, but then you need some harder evidence, some harder circumstances to convict somebody. And I know all courts are different. Fingerprint, you can lock somebody up. Face, you cannot lock somebody up. Based on a face match score, you can't say that Jean-Christophe's algorithm is so good that you need to put this guy in jail. It's not that clear cut.
Mark, I don't think what you're saying is it's sort of not agreeing on the quality of the images. Actually, what you're saying is that the importance of error rate, which obviously I agree. Error rate obviously is important, but the point is, if you have very low quality images, you can't have a very low error rate. So what are you saying? It's not disagreeing in the quality, but emphasizing the importance of the error rate.
I think we'll not reconcile this panel on this point. I think the purpose of forensic science is not to prove beyond reasonable doubt. It's not what is expected from us. I think what is expected from us is to bring to the trier of fact an element which may help and support the trier of fact in his decision making. So that it is not to say that error rates has not a role to play, but we need to be very clear about what we mean by error rates, because all error rates I have seen during this conference are posterior probabilities, and we are not answering the right questions the court is facing. So we need to think about what is an appropriate measure of the weight of evidence we want to present, and certainly a traditional error rate or equal error rate or false positive rate is not enough and a complete picture to be helpful.
So we have different views then on qualities, we have different views. Sure.
Okay. I certainly agree with what you say. So obviously I'm not so familiar with the forensics science community. So as you correctly mentioned this morning in your talk, I think one of the very important issues is to establish a common language. That is, we have to understand from the biometric community, we have to understand what are the real needs from the forensics community. And the equal error rate, all that, these are the terms that we use in biometric community. But that's not really true for the forensics community, right?
Yeah, but so what come out then is that even though we use similar terms, we have different meanings. So we speak about quality, we speak about error, we speak about probabilities, but the meaning can be different. Any ideas? How could we join them then? Stan, yes.
Microphone?
Yes.
I listened to Christop's very nice talk this morning, and in China, I have been involved in massive face database search. That's currently we are doing several projects that's at least 10 million and above. And I have discussed with these police people and who involved in some forensics screening and evidence search. And my view is that, and Christoph asked how the Mars marries Venus. I think it's good to combine to get the strength of each, and while minimize the weakness of each side. I think computerized face recognition, for example, the advantage, the strength is that it can deal with large data. Beyond, for example, for face recognition, if it's beyond thousands of faces, it's very difficult for people to search over the database to find the face. This because of the human's limitation on face recognition. In lifetime, for example, one person can have maybe a few thousand of familiar faces, but beyond that, it's very impossible to do that. So I think we can take advantages of computerized biometrics to search over the large database. However, biometrics can make stupid mistakes. For example, the program can mistake a female as a man, very stupid. Some obvious mistakes can be avoided by human inspection. So I propose to those people that I can say, just Crystal mentioned that we should take the strength of each side. That is computerized biometrics in large database, but the final decision is human inspector to do. That's my view.
Which is exactly in disagreement with what Christoph you said this morning, isn't it? That was not trustful. Yes, can you comment on that?
Well, I think we are on the same wavelength here, but just to be a bit provocative with traditional experts, because they are not in the room. No, I'm quite happy to say this to them as well. As long as we have the same type of objective measure we develop to assess biometric systems should be developed also to assess experts operating as black boxes. And as long as we both treat them equally, and we don't only trust the expert because he's the expert. I think we are on the right way by combining both of his judgment together.
Yeah, and I was also asked whether face recognition can provide scores as evidence. I said no. For example, take one face, for example, if you rotate a little bit, the score of similarity will drop significantly. So that does not mean the appearance change. That's because your computer program cannot make sensible scores that human can be better to evaluate the similarity. So I would say that maybe calculation by forensics experts can have their reasons. And as you say, biometric can provide a scoring from large database. For example, we provide biometric programs can provide, for example, top 10, top 20, top 50, 100, even a few hundreds for human inspectors to further analysis. I think the final decision should be made by human expert rather than by computer program, because we know that biometric program can make stupid mistakes, obvious mistakes. So that should be avoided by human inspectors.
Brendan?
If I could follow up on that too, I think if you take, we'll just go with face because we can visualize it, but take the 6 billion people in the world and take everyone in here and you do a retrieval on them and you look at the top 10 matches to yourself, you're going to find people that look strikingly similar. I think a human, if they looked at any of those top results, could say that this is the same person or that they couldn't. Who knows? It would probably be fairly random. I think a lot of us, there's this doppelganger, right? People who look very similar to other people. I'm sure there's fingerprints that look very similar to other fingerprints. I think when you look at forensics, the key here is that there's a lot of other contextual information. So when a human examiner is looking at retrieval results, like Professor Lee is discussing, that they have to verify this, but maybe what they verify is, they'll do the sanity check of, okay, there's not anything that can confirm these are different people. Everything looks like they are the same person, but they don't just stop there. If they look to be the same person, they can't just say, this is our guy, let's go arrest him. I mean, you need to see, is this person even in the area when the crime occurs? Is this person dead? Is this person in jail? Is it, there's, the reason it works in forensics is because there's a lot of reasons you can rule out your top retrievals. Most people are not viable suspects.
That's very important, because this goes back to what Professor Tan told about multimodality. And you said the inconsistency of multimodal data in forensics?
Okay, I mean, your study is from my lab, so usually I agree with him, but, half agree with what he said. Actually, there are two separate issues there, in what Stan said. Actually, one of them is, you're talking about, the robustness of the current computation methods. This is obviously, something we can improve. Not because we can't say that face analysis is not useful for forensic application, because the current algorithm cannot give you very confident, results on the issue. That depends how we can, improve further the robustness of the computational methods. That's one issue. The other issue, I agree with you, that is, the biometric methods only provides, evidences which are really of assistive nature, not of decisive or conclusive nature. So the decision eventually have to be made by humans, and that's what you said, which I agree.
Yeah. Can I mention that when database...
Sorry, Stan, just 1 second. I would like to come back to the multimodal idea, because I wanted to put on a practical issue, because I think that's a very important issue. And in biometrics, we have a lot of experience on combining data from different sources. So do you think that can be a scientific input from biometric to the forensic community on multimodal combination?
Yeah.
Mark.
I think I'm going to be a no-sayer tonight. Criminals are wise these days. They know that their face can be recognised. They know that their fingerprints can be recognised. Yeah. So in my situations, they've always worn motorbike helmets and they've worn gloves and they've kept everything apart. But they had to get there and they had to get away. And so they're recognisable by their gait. Of course, I'm kind of biased on this score. And the clue, so in a way, multimodal is not possible because you've only got the gate. And the clue was in what Brendan just said. He said, a doppelganger. That means a double by the way you walk.
I don't agree. Okay, I mean, right now, in this situation, probably true that the only variable modality is gate. But who knows? Maybe in 5 years, you can collect the iris images from you cannot cover the eyes. You can cover your mouth, the face, but you cannot cover your eyes. So all the criminals, yeah. So we are trying to develop sort of iris capture systems at a distance, maybe 10 meters, and they are obviously demo systems which can capture your iris images from 10 meters or even farther. So maybe in 5 years' time we have two of these modalities.
The key seems to be latency as well. That iris is nice, and if you have the person's iris, that's great. But you have to know to capture their iris, and typically the crime happens, and you have to go back after the fact and find clues. And it would be nice. Well, maybe some people wouldn't think it's nice if there's cameras capturing people's irises everywhere they go. From a law enforcement perspective, it would be very convenient. But from the multimodal, we have to work with what we have. So sometimes it's face, sometimes it's fingerprints, sometimes it's gait. The Boston bombers, they didn't cover their face, even though they knew that one of them didn't. One of them wore sunglasses. They knew they were committing an egregious act. They had to know they were in a heavily cameraed area. They didn't care, in a sense, I think. So you have to look at criminals' motives as well. Some want to get away with it. Some just want to do terrible things.
Kartik?
So this discussion about the multimodal analysis brought me to one of the slides which Professor Jain presented yesterday called ubiquitous biometrics. So there we had a similar discussion. So let's say a credit card company wants to find out who is doing the transaction. They just don't rely on the biometric information alone. They look at what kind of transaction is going on, from where the transaction is originating, and whether this person is likely to do this kind of transaction. So they look at all these factors and then come up with a kind of risk score, saying, okay, this transaction, how likely it is to be originating from a genuine user. So the case of forensics seems to be very similar to that kind of idea. So whether this person is likely to be in this crime scene, and then what kind of information we have, whether it's gait or fingerprint. So we have different kinds of information. So we need an overall framework to kind of combine all this information to come up with a kind of likelihood whether this person is likely to be the criminal.
I agree. That's why I was thinking about quality before too, and I don't know what people think about quality, but if you have different multimodal as well, understanding the quality with respect to each. Well, maybe you have gait and face. I don't know what makes a good gait image, but if I have law enforcement people using gait algorithms, they're going to need Mark to help give guidance of what's good gait, and maybe you have good gait, bad face, so to lend more credence to your gait as opposed to face. So it goes back to this human interaction and knowing your data and knowing what the consequences of that data are.
Joseph?
Thank you. Connecting to the idea that the criminals are smart, I think they can, in the future, also pollute the crime scene, given that they can be aware of imposting possibilities with non-live methods. I'm thinking about one of the exhibits, which is producing latex fingers and silicone fingers. I can imagine that a criminal could walk around and pollute the crime scene, which by imposting on others.
Yeah.
Well, overall, the truth of the matter is that criminals are not smart, which is. Some of them are indeed, but the bulk of the clients are not in the sort of category you described. And when fingerprint was presented as a mean to potentially find criminals based on the traces they left behind, the first reaction was, well, everybody will put gloves on. And nowadays, on volume crime, for example, there is more than 30% of burglaries where you find marks left by the burglar, finger marks, and everybody knows that you should not. You should put gloves on. And when you multiply the modalities in this sort of corroborative sense, as we discussed, it starts to be quite difficult to prevent you from fingerprints, DNA, hairs, images, iris, footwear marks. And altogether it's making the job of a very clever criminal more and more difficult. The fake, it was raised very early in the 20th century, as early as I think 1927 was published the first book with a complete recipe about how to create fake fingers, to leave marks on a crime scene of someone else, to incriminate the person. And these cases, although maybe it's just the tip of the iceberg, but the number of known cases of such actions are quite limited. The same occurred with DNA, where we thought that a lot of cases will occur by people putting someone's cigarette butt of a friend, so to speak, on the crime scene you just perpetrated. I'm not saying this does not exist, but it is not the mainstream activities of the regular people coming in police notice.
Okay, so I think that so far we understood that we have a different conception of quality. We have different objectives, biometrics and forensics. We have to convince a judge, after all. One question anybody can ask, but maybe Christophe, you are the best one to answer. If it's difficult to convince a judge based on a biometric measurement on one modality, are we sure we can convince a judge on a multimodal fusion of different traces using some classifiers, multiple classifier system? What do you think?
I don't know, because I haven't tried. Although I tried with Bayesian networks to combine different types of evidence in one case, without much success, I must admit. I think you have to keep in mind that judges are doing fusion all the time. Through the accumulation of evidence presented to them, through one mechanism or another, they are fusing this information to build up their belief and update their belief in the case. So fusion is not alien to judges. Now, how we can convey this in a manner they understand it, it's certainly a challenge which I look forward to see taken by some of you.
So that can be a challenge for further research for our student, maybe? What do you think?
Well, I think that if we can deal with one piece at a time before fusing them, it might be quite good. So I go back to Mark's suggestion, if we can, for gate evidence, if we can have a robust framework to present gate evidence in court in a way where it is accepted and recognized as trustworthy by judges, it will be a huge advance. Then the question of combining gate with iris and face all together, it's probably for the next century.
Indeed. Okay. Any questions about that? I think you have the answer to this idea of combining it as from the next century. Yes, Trimachos.
I want to share one experience that I have. I'm watching too much TV, I guess. So there was a crime scene, and a girl in a gas station was murdered, and the guy was not smart enough to wear a helmet or any cover his identity, but the camera was not in a smart way was placed up high behind the counter, so you cannot not only see the face clearly, but the quality of the camera was quite poor. In the end, they actually managed to capture the guy by ruling out suspects. And what is my point? My point is that sometimes biometrics cannot help, but what we've learned over the years from the biometric research is a lot of ways of dealing with information and data that can help us rule out suspects. Forensics, within the forensics, is not only to convince the judge, but also to get leads. And using smartly image processing and pattern recognition can help
officers and find leads. And what happened in this case, and I will stop here, is that in the end there were like only 2 people left as suspects, and they used from NASA super resolution, and they improved the quality of the video to determine that this guy is not 30 to 40 years old as they initially expected. He is 40 to 50, and based on only 1 mark on his hand, they actually rule out the other suspect and find out the criminal. Thank you.
Mark?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, we noticed when we were investigating some of the crime scenes with gait that you just can't see the legs sometimes. Yeah, and so that's why we've moved to soft biometrics. Yeah, my student on the first day described soft biometrics for face, but we're also doing a form of Bertillon on eyes. Yeah, and I've got a copy of Bertillon on my desk, and we use it, we read it. Yeah, because the question is, how can you identify people from soft biometrics? And it's precisely that agenda that soft biometrics, the soft biometrics that we're working on, that's what they're designed to address. I think it's absolutely right.
Okay, do you have any comments on that? Tianyu, you are an expert in iris, but you've been working also on soft biometrics, right?
Well, my hope is still on iris recognition. even though I wrote the very first book, first monograph on case recognition with Mark and Professor Ramachalapa. And as Mark said early on, on many situations, many occasions, the only available modality is gait. People cover their face. But I truly believe that if we can capture iris images, simultaneous iris images of multiple people from a distance, and that would be really useful for forensic applications. And we are working on that. So obviously, if you're interested in that, we can discuss that.
And it's your concept of soft biometrics.
Well, certainly, obviously, if you, for example, you do the video analysis, you can differentiate. If you can tell that it's a female or male, or you can even tell the age group. That certainly helps. But obviously, you cannot make a final decision on that based just on soft biometrics. So basically, the point is that we should collect as many sources of information as possible, and then try to combine them in a sensible way.
Okay, so we have some issues raising here. Now, what do you think, and that's a question for all of you, and of course for all the platform, what do you think is a good collaborative model to have biometric and forensic people to work together on these problems and getting some solution, of course?
That's an easy one to answer.
Okay.
As I said, Massimo, even though I know you are leading a project, a European project entitled Integrating Biometrics and Forensics, right? I think the word integrate is not a very good word. It's not very appropriate. I think, as I said, forensics is really application for biometrics. You can say integrate biometrics into forensics, but it probably makes more sense to say that.
Christoph would disagree.
I don't know. I mean, we'll see. What he was saying. Yeah. So I think really it's biometric for forensics, not a simple the integration. Because as I said earlier, forensics is really a very interesting, challenging application for biometrics. I said early on when I just opened my remarks, I said forensics application, it should be really a very good driving force for biometrics research, because many of the cases that we are presented with in forensic applications are very challenging in terms of the quality of biometric
But then,
images.
we have a problem here, because when you're dealing with an application, you need the data. But it's difficult to get data on forensic cases.
It's scarcity. That's what I'm saying. That's the data.
That's exactly what I wanted to say. I think the whole thing is data sharing. That you can't use biometrics if you don't have the data in your database, in your gallery. So, I mean, just think of the European Union, that you can go from Spain to France without issue. You can cross the border without issue. But does Spain and France share databases together? Probably not, or maybe so. So in the United States, this has been a big effort of the government for different agencies to share their data. And, within one similar government, it can become difficult. But if we want to leverage biometrics, you can't match somebody with a biometric if they don't exist in your database. So I think for forensics to all come together with biometrics databases, there needs to be better sharing of data.
So that's it. So Christophe and then Christophe and then Stephanie.
Well, I mean, just to jump on Professor Tan's comment, I described the wedding this morning, and biometrics were Mars and forensic science was Venus, and I think the terms were rightly chosen. In fact, Mars is working for Venus. Yes. So, so I quite agree that, in fact, biometric systems will contribute to the issues of forensic science. But to expand on this, there is one person we missed in the wedding, and that was mentioned by my friend from Montreal this morning at coffee time. Forensic science is also working for the criminal justice system, so it's a cascade system, and certainly if we want to develop a full understanding on the whole chain, it's not only to have Mars and Venus to talk together, but it's probably to have God, which is judge, in place as well to help in the process, because at the end of the day, forensic science is at the service of the criminal justice system.
Before you give the floor to Stephanie, I know Stephanie's been waiting for a long time. I just want to go back to the point that you're asking, what we can do to integrate biometrics in forensic science. And I think today's panel is a very good start. I would suggest that in later versions of ICB, we can, for example, organize special sessions for on biometric for forensics. And that would be a very good platform for people to talk about. Stephanie, please.
And then is another.
So I think mine might be kind of related, and maybe I missed the beginning of the session, so maybe this is already covered. But we talk about the whole community, but most of the forensic science community is not here. So where, to have a marriage, usually you both kind of have to be present. We appreciate you coming, because I think all of us would really like to attack some of these problems, and maybe to some extent have. So what, is there a joint conference in the future? Is there a conference you suggest we attend that would be the most open to our kind of work? I mean, I know there's the IAI and some of the different conferences in the field, and so maybe if you've already covered it, I'm really sorry. And my second comment is regarding data. I mean, in the biometrics community, we are very good at collecting data, but we need guidance on what to collect. I mean, we're doing latent fingerprints in my lab. A number of the other labs do latent fingerprints, and so if there's sort of if we're in touch with the community with which would be interested in data sets that could be used for benchmarking, we want to make a good one. And so if we make a good one, then maybe it'd be useful, even if you can't share what is an operational data set to an open community, that's fine. Just tell us, is this a good one or a bad one, and we'll try to be reflective of what the real operational challenges are. That's my comment.
Yeah, I guess we need to circulate it wider, but there was an international workshop on biometrics and forensics, which was held earlier this year, chaired by Massimo, and we had Anil and Christophe talking too and stuff, yeah. But the audience it did have forensic practitioners as well as biometrics practitioners too. So that forum is going to repeat next year.
Next year in April.
Next year in April, yeah. So Massimo will be adding you to the...
Yes, we have one more comment here.
So I don't mean to shift away from all this meta-level organizational thinking, because I like that stuff, but I had a question, Brendan, for you, sort of on quality. So presumably at one point, the low-quality images of today were the high-quality images of yesterday. So in that sense, quality is sort of an algorithmic component. Do you agree with that?
So you're saying that the older images were low quality in the sense that the quality changes over time?
Well, you have new algorithms that can deal with that low quality image. At one point, an image that was 100 by 100 resolution was amazingly high quality. Now 500 by 500 resolution is better quality. Yeah. So I guess what I'm trying to get to is that since this is sort of a zero-sum game, you know, there are only so many people working in advancing these algorithms, does it make sense to focus a lot of work on figuring out quality measures for particular algorithms or designing more advanced algorithms?
So this is just my opinion, but I think that quality should treat a face recognition system as a black box. So modern face recognition algorithms may have may need more higher spatial frequency to, get the outputs they expect. So with a particular matcher, you should be able to objectively determine, given data, what quality means to your matcher.
Right. So, okay. So if it's dependent on the matcher, then is it worth spending a ton of time, analyzing a particular quality metric for a matcher rather than developing a matcher that can deal with,
Yeah, so I think that, if you look at, our body of research in this community, we have heterogeneous face recognition algorithms. We have people that develop, off-pose face recognition algorithms. We have a lot of these different face recognition algorithms. Even if you look at, decision theory, that, often one single decision plane doesn't work. You need multiple decision planes. So if you think of these matchers solving separate problems, that you're probably not going to get this all together in one box. You can, but within that box, you need to decide which matcher. So if I wanted to design just a fully unconstrained face matcher, it's probably going to have a lot of piecewise matchers within it, whether that's implicitly or explicitly. So if you think of each of those matchers individually, I would think quality metrics can be as simple as embedded within your own matcher, deciding the quality with respect to your frontal face matcher, your off-pose matcher, your heterogeneous matcher, and knowing which one to select amongst those. So, quality is a broad term. I think for us, maybe that's a more fun application if we can apply it from an automated perspective. But I think that also translates to the forensic users and people that actually use these systems. Because right now you don't have that. Maybe you have a pit-pat for off-pose face images, and you have Morpho for frontal face images. If you could be provided objective measures of which to select, right now that's how it is. It's not an integrated system, but there's a human in the loop. So I think what you're saying that yes, eventually this needs to be put into one house, and the quality does still apply in that case, in my opinion.
Thank you very much, Benedetta. So maybe a last comment for each of you, and then we can close. Mark, okay, we want to start? Final comment?
I don't know. Yeah, I haven't changed my view at all. We need to investigate the database. We need to investigate that error rate. And we haven't actually addressed it. But having worked on cases, I'm convinced that's what we need to look at.
Brandon?
Yeah, I just think that forensics is a really interesting application of biometrics. It gets us a lot of visibility, but it's also very scary because mistakes are made with forensic uses of biometric technology. It only takes a few prominent examples to cast doubt. In certain cultures, there's already fear of privacy, and because unlike DNA, you passively leave your biometric, we're more susceptible to using it incorrectly. So I think it's just important for us to keep aware of how biometrics and forensics play together. So this is just a great panel to have a discussion.
Well, the same point I already made. I think when you're talking about biometric for forensic applications, the key factor that we have to bear in mind is that the subjects, we are facing are non-cooperative and sometimes are faking. So that's the key point.
Christoph?
I would just, in closure, to answer one question which I didn't. I think, yes, it would be good if forensic laboratories are cooperating more with the biometric community to define the sort of data that would be useful to conduct large-scale tests. I think the forensic community should get their collaboration together in order to promote this, and maybe there is a good call to have at least a European or even a pan-European initiative bringing these two communities with the prospect of designing a forensic database. Let's take fingerprints as a first example. That's the first that come to my mind. At the moment, there is very limited data sets which reflect forensic problems. The NIST SD27 is probably the only one which is available to the research community. It hasn't all the attributes, certainly not in terms of size and quantity of images, which enable the drastic shift in the progress we can expect in these areas. And it would be quite a major but fruitful undertaking to think about having a a shared initiative which can build up a community shareable database of latent prints and known sources which can be used for research purposes. I think, yes, there is a big role to play also on the forensic science laboratory to promote that, which hasn't happened yet.
And it happens by chance. The slide that was on, it's just on data sets. So thank you very much, Christoph, for wrapping up these ideas. So I think that maybe everybody of us can take this home and think about it and maybe discuss with others even today or tomorrow and then the next days and see how we can promote a better collaboration between our communities. And by now, thank you everybody and especially our panelists for your contribution. Thank you very much. So now we change the subject, and we have now the plenary session of the IAPR Technical Committee 4 on biometrics, which of course, yeah.